Good morning, welcome back to another video in this training for my first ever ultramarathon series. I am a week away from the Delamere race now, and I have come for my last long run. Just come to a trail nearby. I'm going to do like 10-11 miles and kind of talk through a few updates. I am wearing these, the North Face Vective Endurance 4s. They're the shoes that I have kind of chosen to hopefully be the shoe that I will be racing the 50k in. So trialing them today, and this is by far the cleanest. You will see these and I will see these because they are going to get filthy today. It's fairly muddy around here, and I am trialing, I want to say new fuel and strategy. It's not really, I'm just using gels and I've done that before. But yeah, let's crack on with this run. Trying to keep it easy today. As I said, race 1 week from now. So let's get on the trails. Let's firstly take this coat off because I am not running this. So it is very, very windy today. And it was raining really heavily on the 10-minute drive. Thankfully, it's now stopped. So today, doing, as I said, 10-11 miles. I like 8-minute miling. Done 8 miles yesterday, but hopefully if it's not too windy, I'll talk you through some of the training tips. Not so much tips, but how I'm gonna build my way up to the 50k. But one of them is essentially double long runs. So yesterday I ran 8 miles, today 10-11, and then as the training gets closer towards the 50k, that's going to be looking more like 20 and 10. So just kind of getting that 50k in all over one weekend. So that is progress in and of itself. First time I've ever actually had an entire gel without wanting to throw. Hopefully it settles quite well. So I'm 5 miles in, the wind has finally died down a bit. So I can kind of finally start talking to camera again, pick back up where I was mentioning about trialing with double long runs. So if you're watching this, I'm sure you probably know what a double long run is. But it's essentially where you do your longest run of the week on, for example, a Saturday, and then you still do a relatively long run on the Sunday. So, as I said, maybe 20 miles on the Saturday, followed by 10 on the Sunday. That almost gives you that 50k distance, and it's kind of training to still run quite far whilst on tired legs the day after. Obviously, the intensity, the speed, the heart rate will be lower, which is kind of an overall theme for the approach I'm taking for my training. The intensity is really going to drop once I'm back from my holiday in Thailand. But that's kind of how I'm going to try and stay injury free. And obviously, strength training is very, very important. So in terms of strength training, it is something that I'm very aware I need to focus on. My legs are relatively strong. They're still quite skinny, but they're relatively strong, as I do quite a fair bit of strength training at the moment for them. But my upper body and core is nowhere where it needs to be. And obviously that's just as important, because if they fall apart at the latter stage of a race, then your form is going to fall to bits, and your legs will inevitably also fall to bits. So that is something that I am definitely going to focus on when I'm in the gym. Something that I've kind of already addressed. I hope so, touch wood, fingers crossed and all that, was when I broke a bone in my foot in October in my Lady Bow race. Now, I believe that may have been down to the shoes, as I've not really had any problems since. And I've started taking calcium supplements because my diet was getting little to no calcium. So I think that's helped, as I said, fingers crossed anyway. Now, something else that I'm going to kind of do to avoid getting injured is increasing the volume safely. Now the 20% rule is kind of well known. Don't increase your weekly mileage more than 20% of the previous week. I'm going to roughly stick to that. But another method that I'll be honest I've overlooked numerous times in the past, and most people probably do, but is having down weeks every 4 weeks or so. That is something that I'm definitely going to do for this training block. It's essentially where you increase your training volume, your intensity for 3 weeks straight, and then on the 4th week you have a much less intense week, much less volume, so then you can kind of go again for another 3-week block. That's something I'm definitely going to trial at this time around. Now, one of the two 50Ks that I've chosen has 2,700 meters of elevation gain, which is not something I can find around here. I'd have to do some serious reps of mountains in the Lake District, which is something I am planning on doing at some point, or going likewise to Wales and doing the same. So I think the treadmill and the Stairmaster are going to be my friends for some very specific training in this block. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, I believe it was Tom Evans on it, and he was talking about basically what's the minimum amount of training you can do to reach your goal. Obviously it's quite tough to figure out, considering I've never done a 50k before, but it did get me thinking about ensuring that I don't overtrain. So I think there's going to be a fair bit of cross training in there, as I've already mentioned, a fair few rest days, because ultimately overtraining just leads to either injury or fatigue, where you then miss training, and that's the last thing I want. Ultimately I want to be able to build my long run up to about 3.5-4 hours at the peak of my training. And ultimately if you get fatigued or injured because you pushed a bit too hard on a session, then that becomes irrelevant. Two things I rarely need to become friends with, and most runners are guilty of this, but the first one's stretching. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day, I rarely need to get on top of stretching in this training block. And the second one is power hiking, which, again, as I've said, the trails around here aren't really ideal for that because there's not too many hills, but that can come under the training when I do actually go to a more hilly trail nearby. Or, again, the treadmill can be my friend for that. Thing is though, hills have never really been too much of a problem for me. That's not me saying they're not hard, they are. But I've always trained them, so whether it be cross country, when I used to race that years ago, or in the more recent trail races, it's not really something I've ever struggled with. It's more the downhill, which again is something I'm going to factor in my training plan to get better and get the muscles that are needed for that stronger. So come race day, I'm ready to hopefully deal with that. So final few thoughts really as I head back towards the car. 9 miles done. By the time I get there, it'll be like 11. The only other considerations, as I said, were shoes and hydration. Hydration's gone well today in terms of water and a gel. That's all that's needed for this distance for me really. But obviously, over the 50k, it's something I'll be trying. It's something I'll be testing every single week on the build up to that. And finally, shoes. I've run 10 miles in these now, so small sample size, but they feel great, so I'm fairly confident I've made the right choice there. So back in the car, cut the run slightly short towards the end there. I say slightly short, I've done like 10.3 miles, but that's kind of applying some of the training principles I was talking about in the video, where I don't need to overtrain. I know I can run a half marathon. I literally did a few weeks ago, and the race is next Sunday, so rather than pushing myself a bit too far and maybe getting an injury, I kind of cut it short. In terms of the run, as I said, it was just over 10 miles, 8:04 minute mile, and I think kind of in zone 3 on the Garmin, which is like the aerobic zone, but at the
bottom end of that. So keeping the intensity quite nice and relaxed. Yesterday, as I said, I done 8 miles yesterday, so combining the two, it's just over 18 miles in 2 days, which is, as I mentioned in this video, kind of something that I want to work on, where I'm doing essentially a double long run weekend. But obviously the mileage will increase the closer I get towards being ready to do a 50k. Anyway, the next video you're going to see is either going to be a full review of the shoes, which I said, it's only a small sample size, but they felt great. So I do feel quite confident that I've made the right choice there. They were comfortable, which is obviously one of the main things. The heel lock was perfect, and the toe box width for me was nice. So they're the 3 things that I kind of look for initially in a shoe before kind of getting a real feel for them. So they caused me absolutely no problems on this run, and it was a long run on some different terrain, a bit of road, bit of gravel, bit of mud, bit of grass. It had a bit of everything, and they held their own quite nicely. As I said, next video is either going to be a full review on them or my race from Delamere.